And welcome back, everybody. I am Amira, she, her pronouns. This is a self-compassion book club. Self-compassion by the author Kristen Neef. Am I saying her name correctly? Myself, Rhea, and Misty are doing a book club on it, and we're going to do something a little different tonight. We are going to read the actual chapter, not all of it, but most of it. We're just going to read it together. And I'm going to have Misty kick off with our meditation for tonight.
Yeah, so I'm Misty Bonham and my pronouns are she, her. And I'm going to be reading from page 60. It's the last part of chapter 3. The section's called A Precious Gift. And I'd like to use this as our meditation today. So if we could just take a deep breath. Ground our body wherever we might be, feet on the floor, bottom in the seat. And I'll begin. Self-compassion is a gift available to anyone willing to open up to themselves. When we develop the habit of self-kindness, suffering becomes an opportunity to experience love and tenderness from within. No matter how difficult things get, we can always wrap our torn and tattered selves in our own soft embrace. We can soothe and comfort our own pain, just as a child is soothed and comforted by her mother's arms. We don't have to wait until we are perfect, until life goes exactly as we want it to. We don't need others to respond with care and compassion in order to feel worthy of love. We don't need to look outside ourselves for the acceptance and security we crave. This is not to say that we don't need other people. Of course we do. But who is in the best position to know how you really feel underneath that cheerful facade? Who is most likely to know the full extent of the pain and fear you face, to know what you need most? Who is the only person in your life who is available 24/7 to provide you with care and kindness? You.
I love that. Thank you so much. I needed that. It's been a long weekend. Definitely. Rhea, are you interested in reading the little part before this chapter at all? The little by Einstein?
The quote.
Yeah.
Sure. So, a human being is a part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as or something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Einstein from the Einstein Papers.
Thank you. Okay, this is chapter 4. We are all in this together. The second fundamental element of self-compassion is recognition of the common human experience, acknowledgement of the connected nature of our lives, indeed of life itself, helps to distinguish self-compassion from mere self-acceptance or self-love. Although self-acceptance and self-love are important, they are incomplete by themselves. They leave out an essential factor, other people. Compassion is by definition relational. Compassion literally means to suffer with, which implies a basic mutuality in the experience of suffering. The emotion of compassion springs from the recognition of the human experience is imperfect. Why else would we say it's only human to comfort someone who has made a mistake? Compassion honors the fact that all human beings are fallible, that wrong choices and feelings of regret are inevitable, no matter how high or mighty one is. Although the saying goes, a clear conscience is usually the sign of a bad memory. When we're in touch with our common humanity, We remember the feelings of inadequacy and disappointment are shared by all. This is what distinguishes self-compassion from self-pity. Whereas self-pity says, poor me, self-compassion remembers that everyone suffers, and it offers comfort because everyone is human. The pain I feel is difficult. The pain I feel in difficult times is the same pain that you feel in difficult times. The triggers are different. The circumstances are different. The degree of pain is different, but the process is the same. You can always get what you want. This is true for everyone, even the Rolling Stones. When I read this, it reminded me of a situation that I was in recently, and how I realized I'm in a position where I felt judged by a particular person, and I often feel judged by this person. And I've recognized, instead of going into self-pity mode and saying it's my fault and my problem, I've recognized within myself that it's like, oh, they have an issue with perfection. It's their issue. They need to feel perfect. That's why they critique me, and not looking at it like I'm a loser, I did something wrong. Whereas before I developed that self-compassion, I would have blamed myself for someone critiquing me. I would have said I'm stupid because they critiqued me. And now I could say it's still bothersome and it's something that I need to address, but I've recognized that that's their need for perfection. It's not me to go into self-pity. So, okay. We often become scared and angry when we focus on undesired aspects of ourselves or our lives. We feel helpless and frustrated by our inability to control things, to get what we want to be, or who we want to be. We rail against things as they are, and we cling to our narrow vision of how things should be. Every single human is in the same boat. The beauty of recognizing this basic fact of life, the silver lining, so to speak, is that it provides deep insight into the shared human condition. And then I think, Misty, we're going to do the next part. Or Rhea.
Rhea, would you like to do it? Are you okay? Okay.
Go ahead. His name.
Okay. Isolated and alone. Sadly, however, most people don't focus on what they have in common with others, especially when they feel ashamed or inadequate. Rather than framing their imperfection in light of the shared human experience, they're more likely to feel isolated and disconnected from the world around them when they fail. When we focus on our shortcomings without taking the bigger human picture into account, our perspective tends to narrow. We become absorbed by our own feelings of insufficiency and insecurity. When we're in the confined space of self-loathing, it's as if the rest of humanity doesn't even exist. This isn't a logical thought process, but a type of emotional tunnel vision. Somehow it feels like I am the only one who is being dumped, proven wrong, or made a fool of. As Tara Brach, author of Radical Acceptance, writes, feeling unworthy goes hand in hand with feeling separate from others, separate from life. If we are defective, how can we possibly belong? It seems like a vicious cycle. The more deficient we feel, the more separate and vulnerable we feel. And even when we're having a painful experience that is not our fault, perhaps we've been laid off our job because of an economic downturn, for instance, we often irrationally feel that the rest of the world is happily employed while it's only me sitting at home watching reruns all day. Or when we become ill, it feels like sickness is an unusual, abnormal state, like the dying 84-year-old man whose final words were, "Why me?" Once we fall into the trap of believing that things are supposed to go well, we tend to think something has gone terribly amiss when they suddenly don't. Again, this isn't a conscious thought process, but a hidden assumption that colors our emotional reactions. If we were to take a completely logical approach to the issue, we'd consider the fact that thousands of things can go wrong in life at any one time. So it's highly likely, in fact inevitable, that we'll experience hardships on a regular basis. But we don't tend to be rational about these matters. Instead, we suffer and we feel all alone in our suffering.
That was beautiful. I think that quote from Tara Brach definitely resonated. You know, like it, like, and it's hard because I definitely felt with a lot, like felt so much self-loathing, and I think just that section kind of gently says like, hey, like you're being selfish without saying it in a mean way, because it's like so many times when I've struggled with like self-loathing or unworthiness, and people are like, oh, you're always thinking about yourself. It's like, I'm not trying to. I hate myself so much. And it's like, but you're also like, you're so focused on this, like, nobody else exists. Nobody else matters in your world. And because you hate yourself so much, it's like, that's like blocking everything because you can't get past it. And I don't know, just like that whole section, this is like, okay, I could see how like that really does like narrow the focus so down, and it's not like you're trying to, it's just like this pattern, and it's just inevitable when the focus is on like the suffering, like there's no room in your world, and that's just a fact. It's not like, I don't know, it's just not always conscious, but still there. But anyway, if you guys don't have anything, then I can start the next one.
Yeah, you know, y'all, I forgot that I was unmuted, but what you said was like spot on, you know, it's totally true. I mean, that's why I love mindfulness too, because it really does teach you to like retrain your mind. And then when you have action steps that fit with what works for you, because mindfulness is not a cookie cutter thing. You got to find what works for you to get you out of that habit of thinking. That was good, Rhea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So the need to belong. Abraham Maslow was a well-known American psychologist working in the mid-20th century who led the humanistic psychology movement. He argued that the needs for individual growth and happiness can't be met without first satisfying the more basic need for human connection. Without the bonds of love and affection with others, he argued, we cannot go on to achieve our full potential as human beings. Similarly, psychoanalyst Heinz Kohut, I think that's how you say it, I don't know, who developed a model called self-psychology in the early 1970s, proposed that belongingness was one of the core needs of the self. He defined belongingness as the feeling of being human among humans, a feeling that allows us to feel connected to other people. One of the major causes of mental health problems, he felt, was a lack of belongingness, the perception that we are cut off from our fellows. Definitely, I would say, like that sentence, like mental health problems, yes, as far as suffering goes, but not necessarily like, because so often when we say mental health problems, it's in people's minds, it's depression, anxiety, but mental health problems also include psychosis and much more serious things. And so it's like, it's a major cause, or it's a major contributor, that feeling, but it's definitely not like the only cause. But I just need to put that in there. Loneliness stems from the feeling that we don't belong, whether or not we're in the presence of others. If you attend a large party where you don't quite fit in, you're still likely to feel alone. Loneliness comes from feeling disconnected from others, even if they're only inches away. Public speaking anxiety, the #1 phobia experienced in our culture. Is also caused by fear of rejection and isolation. Why does the instruction to imagine your audience in their underwear work? Because it reminds you that the audience is vulnerable and imperfect too. And the image boosts your sense of shared humanity. Even the fear of death itself stems largely from apprehension about losing companionship, closeness, and relationship to others. And feelings of isolation can actually help make that fear a reality. Research indicates that social isolation increases the risk of coronary heart disease by 2 or 3 times. In contrast, involvement in a support group lessens the anxiety and depression experienced by cancer victims while increasing their long-term chances of survival. One of the key reasons support groups are so effective is because members feel less isolated throughout their ordeal. The need to belong, therefore, is fundamental to both physical and emotional health. Feelings of connectedness, like feelings of kindness, activate the brain's attachment system. The befriend part of the tend and befriend instinct has to do with the human tendency to affiliate, to come together in groups in order to feel secure. For this reason, people who feel connected to others are not as frightened by difficult life circumstances and are more readily able to roll with the punches. Of course, it's wonderful when we can get our need to belong met by loved ones such as friends or family. But if you're someone who has trouble sustaining good relationships, this type of social support may be missing in your life. And even in the best of circumstances, other people aren't always able to make us feel that we belong and are accepted. In the cavernous halls of our own minds, we may feel isolated at any moment, even if this isn't the way things actually are. Our fears and self-judgments are like the blinders that often prevent us from seeing the hands that are being held out to help us. We may also be ashamed to admit our feelings of inadequacy to those that we love, for fear that they wouldn't love us anymore if they knew the way we really were. Hiding our true selves from others then makes us feel even more alone. That's why it's so important to transform our relationship with ourselves by recognizing our inherent interconnectedness. If we can compassionately remind ourselves in moments of falling down that failure is part of our shared human experience, then that moment becomes one of togetherness rather than isolation. When our troubled, painful experiences are framed by the recognition that countless others have undergone similar hardships, the blow is softened. The pain still hurts, but it doesn't become compounded by feelings of separation. Sadly, however, our culture tells us to notice how we are unique from others, not how we are the same. Okay, that's that section.
Love that. And it's okay to hear babies in the background. I don't care.
You never know how loud they're gonna get though. It's like, okay, are we going up or are you peeking out here?
It's all to the good. What stood out to me in that, what you read? Excuse me. When it says on page 65, people aren't always able to make us feel the way we want to belong, basically, and feel accepted. And I used to think that I needed my dad's, I used to think that he had to acknowledge how he made me feel for me to be able to heal. So every time we got into a little tiff, I'd be like, you did this, you used to talk to me this way, you need to admit it. And he'd be like, no, I didn't. I'd be like, I felt like I couldn't heal and get past it until he admitted it. And sometimes we don't get that. Sometimes we just can't for whatever reason. The person could have passed on, sometimes you just will never get it. So it's really important to have that, that self-compassion to know that you're never going to get what you need in some cases from that person. So thank you, Rhea. Missy, do you want to read the comparison game and we'll end with that?
Sure. The comparison game. Because our culture demands that we perceive ourselves as special and above average, we routinely engage in an egoistic process of social comparison with others. When we're deeply invested in seeing ourselves positively, we tend to feel threatened if others do better than we do. Liz, for instance, felt great for getting her first annual review at her new job. The report praised her hard work and effort and also promised a 5% raise starting the next fiscal year. Elated, she rang her boyfriend with the news. Fantastic, he said. I'll have the champagne ready when you get home. Later in the parking lot, however, Liz overheard a colleague talking excitedly on her cell phone. The report said I was the most promising new employee of the year, and get this, they're giving me a 10% raise. That's twice the 5% everyone else gets. Isn't that amazing? In half a second, Liz went from feeling fabulous to feeling like a complete failure. Instead of celebrating her good fortune with her boyfriend when she got home, she ended up crying on his shoulder. One of the saddest consequences of social comparison is how we distance ourselves from people whose success makes us feel bad about ourselves. Interestingly, one study found this to be true both literally and figuratively. Researchers told study participants they were assessing student interest in and knowledge of various topics for an upcoming College Bowl competition. Students thought they were being tested in pairs, but the other student was really part of the research team. A mock competition was held, and students fielded a series of questions about topics such as rock music or football. The experimenters told students either that they had outperformed their partner or else that their partner had outperformed them. Next, experimenters assessed how close participants felt to their study partner by asking how much they thought they had in common and how much they wanted to work with their partner in the future. They even looked at how physically close they sat to their partner when both were moved to another room. Students felt more distant from partners and also sat farther away from them when they were told that they had been outperformed. The sad irony is that the very reason we want to succeed in the first place is because we want to feel accepted and worthy, to be close to others, to feel that we belong. It's a classic catch-22. The very act of competing with others for success sets up an unwinnable situation in which the feelings of connectedness we crave are forever out of reach.
It's deep. Have you guys ever been in a situation where you felt that energy of like competition in a work setting or in life?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel this a lot of times with like art and stuff too. They're like, oh, there's already somebody who's really good at watercolors, like why do I need to be out there or whatever. But it's like, why, like with this situation, like why is it that you feel more connected when, or like why do you feel like you're closer or more excited to engage with people when you feel like you are outperforming them? And I think that's because we know that we, like, if we know that we're like have a leg up on something, or we're like a special skill, or we're a little bit better or whatever, like we know we have something to offer the group. And like it's, because so often like this stuff is painted like, oh, they just love pride and stuff, like, or they're like just really proud of themselves, or like they're just like ego, which is like true, like we be in our egos for sure. But also like when you have something to offer and like stuff, it, you know, you can contribute to the group and like, you know, you have value then. And it's like it's hard because it's like, what am I gonna do now? You're doing art, like I'm not better than those people. And it's like, but I'm still like getting something out there that is, you know, unique, and it's just another story. And not that like art doesn't really, there's so many different types of art and like versions of like what's good anyway, like of all the things to like compare yourself out. Art's such a silly one because like it's not even like you can be like, oh, they got 100 on that out of, you know, 99 or whatever. Like, it's just kind of silly, but it's still hard.
I do the same thing. I compare myself when I see like other mindfulness coaches or meditative, even lately, because I've been seeing a lot more women of color that do what I do, like mindfulness wise. And I have to remember that like I'm still different. I still do things differently. I still, you know, have my own style, and to keep it pushing. I at least can recognize it sooner than making myself suffer over it, you know, like I maybe used to. But I try to typically be that girlfriend type of cheerleader friend that's like, even when it comes to friendships, I was that cheerleader. Like if you're doing good, I want to boost you up. I don't really like the feeling of competition. It feels weird. What about you, Misty?
Yeah, I've been on both ends of it, comparing myself to others and then being the one people are comparing to, and neither one's really, doesn't, either one feels good. It is kind of like she said, a catch-22, because we're trying to feel accepted while at the same time outperforming people. Trying to outperform people doesn't make any sense. But I do think I think she goes into this a little more deeply somewhere else too, but this very beginning of the section where she talks about we're taught to think of ourselves as special and above average. And it's like, that's something we have to think about ourselves. We can't just be like, okay at things. We've got to be great at everything, you know? And really just letting go of that and realizing, that's where you kind of like are able to bond with humanity and be like, maybe I'm not the best at this or whatever, but I enjoy it. It is something I'm good at.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And it reminds me of the.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say that also is like reminds me of just like the Western chauvinism and like that white supremacy idea, like, oh, we're the best because we have to be the best at everything. We can't just be like it has to be the best.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere, all over our country. Sorry, that's all I was gonna say.
No, yeah, it's hard to feel that way and to know that, like, even recognizing when someone else is trying to put their perfection on me, it's really hard to say, no, Amira, you know better. You know better, But it gets to a point where eventually you have to say something, and then you have to give yourself self-compassion that you have to say something, because then you're probably going to hurt someone's feelings, and then you give yourself self-compassion for that. Cycle of self-compassion. Holding boundaries and self-compassion. But I think this is awesome. Thank you both very much. We will post this one. Today is the 14th of March, and I will have no technical difficulties. And will give myself self-compassion along the way. And it'll be posted next Sunday around 3-ish. And I give myself self-compassion for posting a few hours late today. I posted our Rhea's video a couple hours late, and I was like starting to beat myself up over it, and said, you know what? I had a great weekend, didn't have time to get it done, and it's okay.
It is okay.
It's fine.
Absolutely.
So much. Any last words before we go?
Not
Okay.
from me.
Thank you. Self-compassion, everybody. Yay.